This isn't a moment for politics. It's a moment for clarity. So let me be clear. Peaceful protest in America. Violent protest is not protected. Peaceful protest is. It's against the law when violence occurs. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest. There's the right to protest, but not the right to cause chaos.
Mr. President, have the protests forced you to reconsider any of the policies with regard to the region?
No. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you think the National Guard should intervene?
No.
Just the walk away no is solid. So that was the president, the Democratic president, Joe Biden, who seems to not be in total disagreement with some of his Republican colleagues who also believe that these protests are somehow violent. When, if you've been paying attention over the last week or two, you'll know that most of the violence has been coming from the police. If you put on equal footing using chairs to barricade a door and using flashbangs and rubber bullets and firing them directly at students' heads or throwing them downstairs, as happened at Columbia University 2 nights ago, I would question everything about you, my dude. So that's where he stands, and good on that reporter for following up and saying, so is this gonna make you change what these protests are actually about and your policies towards them? The fact that they're protesting the amount of money that you are sending to Israel that continues to conduct a genocide on the people of Gaza? The answer, no. Yaz, I have a dark, terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach that this is not going to bode well for this president. This will not endear him to voters that he otherwise desperately needs.
Yeah, you have to wonder about Joe Biden's long-term strategy here, because it does seem both parties are in a tricky position, but specifically the Democrats on this, because a lot of Democrats do not support the state of Israel, and a lot of Democrats do not like what we're seeing our government do on behalf of us, our democratic government over in Israel. All the money that's being funneled to them, all the debts that are being excused and overlooked, all the property damage that's happening in Gaza, by the way, which they don't really seem to care about that as much either. There's so much going on with these campus protests, not just with the protesters and the protests themselves, but with the response to them. And it's all very predictable, right? We know that whenever protests like this happen, whatever the issue is, they will often call on, there's property damage. We'll hear that every single time. We hear about the property damage and oh, you can't disrupt normal everyday people. You can't cancel graduations and things. By the way, it's the students canceling their own graduations, right? They're the ones who are doing this, right? So,
and not even, in fact, a lot of Columbia decided to go remote because they weren't willing to just allow a protest to be. Same thing with USC. They decided to cancel their entire commencement instead of allowing the valedictorian to speak for fear that she might utter the words, "Let's stop killing the people of Gaza."
Right. So whenever you have these protests too, what that does, it also triggers a conversation about what is the point of all these protests. Nothing's gonna come from it. And whenever you get responses like the one that we just saw from Joe Biden, where he just says, no, it's not gonna impact me and my decision making, then those arguments seem to have some kind of credence to them. But really, there's a reason why these issues come up months and months and months in advance of elections, right? And what they do, these protests, first of all, they show a lot of solidarity, not just with American people who do sympathize with the Palestinians. They may be afraid to speak out about it, but it encourages conversation. It also shows people overseas that we are not supportive of our government and the things that our government is doing on behalf of us. And that's also very important. So whenever we have these discussions, we need to discuss them. We have to talk about them. We have to talk about these protests, because that's why they're protesting, is so that we'll talk about it. And all of that makes a big difference. And hopefully, it's hard to say that I would like to see some of this be reflected in November as far as the election goes, but it's hard to say because both parties, neither of them are trying to help the Palestinians. So we really are in a tough situation as Democratic voters.
Yes, and they're demonizing these students, you know, and they're in consensus about that. And I think I want to remind everyone that, of course, the pressure is on Joe Biden, as Yaz rightly said, and as Joe Biden, whether he admits it or not, is absolutely feeling. But the demand concretely is for disclosure to know whether the tuition money that these students are giving their elite universities is being invested in either weapons contractors or Israeli contractors directly, and perhaps profiting off of what is happening over there. And they take issue with that. And once that disclosure is done, meaning they know what the portfolio looks like, can we divest from these corporations that are making money off of either the occupation or the genocide in Gaza directly? The last thing I want to say on this is the violence can be prevented. The violence can be stopped. You've seen mayors in city after city decide not to send in the police, decide not to work with university presidents to send in the cops, right? Irvine, California did that. Upstate in Brown University, they decided not to send in the cops to break up that campus protest. There are many ways to just allow people to exercise their First Amendment rights, so long as they are not disrupting anybody, and go on your merry way. People get tired after a while. I've been at campus protests before. Sometimes you get tired. You go, you come, you're not actually looking for violence. These kids are peace protesters. But even our president wants us to forget that.
Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.